You have to keep in mind that although this is a big video, from 6 p.m. Friday to about 11 a.m. on Sunday, you are subject to be shot at any time. There's no safe space. If you didn't bring enough food, you're gonna be hungry unless you could, trade for something like prison style. If you didn't bring enough water, you're gonna have to drink bladder water. If you didn't pack the right gear, you're gonna suffer. So it's a good idea to watch this video. So there's a bunch of Milsim West packing videos out there. I'm gonna try and link a few of them down in the description below. But this is really gonna focus on the very, very niche player base of California airsofters going to a Milsim West event for their very first time. So really this is only gonna focus on what you need for the Victorville and Clovis Force on Force events. I'm gonna exclude the Insurgency because that is like its own thing that I will do separate videos on later. So this is just focused on California events if you're a first timer. I've personally done the Victorville Insurgency twice. I just finished up the Azeri Revolt last weekend. I have done the Victorville Force on Force once. I have done the Clovis Force on Force once. And at both those Force on Force events, I was paid cadre for Milsim West. I've seen newer players make basically one of two categories of mistakes, for lack of a better term. One is overpacking, and two is bringing shit you don't need because you're a little comfortable city boy house cat. When I say overpacking, I mean items that are important, but you brought way too many of them, like 4 jackets or 15 pairs of socks, stuff like that. So the item itself is important, you just brought way, way, way more than you needed. Bringing shit you don't need is like bringing a propane-powered personal heater instead of just layering adequately for the nighttime. Here's how easy California-based Milsim West Force on Force events are. I haven't brought a rucksack yet. I've gone ruckless for both the Azeri Assault, that was in October of 2022, and then the Kharkiv Pocket, which was, I want to say, March of this year, 2023. At the Azeri Assault, I just wore my Smersh as a rucksack, which is like a load-bearing vest system kind of thing, but it's like Russian style. I had a Haley Flat Pack 2.0 on my back that I had zip tied to it, and then I had a butt pack down on my butt on the belt itself, and that was it. I just stuffed everything I needed in that. And I had clipped my sleep system basically to the pistol belt of the Smersh. At that particular event, I was running a Haley chest rig as like a BB fighting gear, and my Smersh was what I was using as a standalone ruck. At the Kharkiv Pocket, which is in Clovis at Hill 559, I just had my Smersh as both a ruck and as a fighting gear, as my chest rig itself. So I did the same thing. But I had my flat pack on D-rinks so I could take it off and on. Same thing, I had my butt pack fixed onto me, and I had just clipped on my sleep system, like my sleeping bag and all that. But I haven't done a rucksack yet. I will for the next Force on Force. I'm probably gonna get the Osprey, the Rook 50 or 55. I'll put a little picture right here for it. Because just for like a little bit more convenience, really, and a little bit more comfortability, and just sort of to organize things a little bit better. And for the overall like immersionist aspect of everyone has a rucksack, so I'm not trying to be an individual. Now granted, in this little ruckless setup that I have, it wasn't exactly like secured to me as if it was like more of a rucksack. It's a little bit more of like a gypsy setup. So like my my sleeping bag, because I had it clipped basically down to the pistol belt, would keep like bumping into my ass every step I had, so that was kind of annoying. So that's why I'm gonna switch to a rucksack, just for that really. The biggest error I see players making that I think they're making, that they forget to doing, is weighing their rucksack. So when you pack your rucksack, get on a scale without it, take a note of how much you weigh, put your rucksack on, and then weigh yourself again. If you're exceeding like 30 pounds, you're bringing too much shit to a California Force on Force for Milsim West. Again, I just told you I was successful at 2 Milsim West events at different AOs without a rucksack. When you're packing your ruck, you need to look at each item and ask yourself, do I need this or do I want it? What do you need? What is necessary? Sleep system, food, maybe a way to cook that food depending on what you bring. So if you're bringing like Mountain House meals, yeah, you're gonna need hot water to boil it in. Changes of socks and underwear, a jacket, day and nighttime eye pro. So like black tinted for the daytime. And I personally use the yellow, the rose colored glasses. I don't like using clears. I like using those, the yellow ones. Maybe a spare uniform set, maybe. A red lens headlamp. I would recommend a separate bright white light source, basically to mess with dudes wearing night vision. And that's really it. Other than like the mandatory items that the tax op's gonna have as well. But realistically, you know, the tax op, the red items, that's really all you need. Anything else is just bonus or heavy. For a sleep system, now when I say sleep system, I mean my sleeping bag, my bivy bag, and my sleep pad. I have the REI Hunker Down. It costs about $200, and it's rated at 20 degrees. I initially had a Kelty summer bag. I ran it for the last year's, the 2022 insurgency. That was in Mayish, I believe it was. I was freezing my ass off a little bit. For a sleeping bag, I highly recommend you get something that's rated at like 20 degrees. Not like a crazy winter bag, but a normal winter 20 degree rated sleeping bag, because it gets cold as witches' tits at night in both Victorville and Clovis. Not only that, but keep in mind Victorville at night gets really, really windy, so you have to factor in wind chill as well, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I also recommend getting a bivy bag. A bivy bag is like a waterproof shell that goes on the outside of your sleeping bag, so you could, it kind of turns it into like a one-person encapsulated tent if you really wanted to go that route. But more importantly, since it's waterproof, it's going to keep the wind out, and that is very beneficial if you're at Victorville. I would also recommend, just for little comforts of home, you get thick wool, like those big thick wool camping or those thick wool hiking socks. And if you wanted to, moisture wicking inner sock. So I will wear the inner sock and then the outer thick wool one, so it will keep my feet both warm and dry when I sleep. Otherwise, anyone that's camped knows how cold your tootsies get if you're not doing something to combat it. I also have one of those merino wool, I have a balaclava, the face dealie, and like a watch cap, like a fleece cap, because if it's cold out and you're in your bivy bag or your sleeping bag, naturally you're going to pull it over your head. Well, what's going to happen is as you're breathing, all that condensation from your breath is just going to hang out in your sleeping bag, and you're going to think it's raining. It's not. You've just been breathing, and that warm air has nowhere to go in the cool night, so it just hangs out and gets your face all wet. So what I did to counter that was I put on a balaclava and then a watch cap, a green watch cap. Also that I've noticed, because you're subject to getting shot at night, you want to make sure your eye pro stays on when you're asleep. So that little setup I have really secures my eye pro to my face, so I don't risk getting shot in the face in the middle of the night. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. I put all of that in a compression, like a stuff sack. I think it's like a 52-liter bag, because the bag that my sleeping bag came with was only big enough for my sleeping bag. It wasn't big enough for my sleeping bag and my bivy bag, and my bivy is bigger than my sleeping bag. It's thinner, but still it's a lot of stuff to put in a bag. So I just went out and bought a separate bivy bag, a separate stuff sack for my sleep system. I also use the Neo Switchback sleeping pad. That thing is amazing. It's easy to fold, it's easy to transport. I personally don't recommend those inflatable sleep pads because they are subject to getting shot, which means they're gonna get punctured. And if you're at Victorville, there's just sharp, jagged shit there's old nails, there's bits of concrete, there's sharp, jagged rocks, there's all kinds of shit that would love to tear up your inflatable sleep pad. So I use specifically the Neo Switchback. That thing's amazing. I've been using it since last October. That thing's good to go. You're probably only gonna sleep about 3-ish, 4-ish hours, depending on like op tempo, sometimes more, sometimes less, but not sleeping is sort of part of Mil Sim West. That's part of the experience, is to be tired and miserable, and you paid for it. Getting shot while you're asleep is also part of the game if your security's not set right. Again, I'll talk about that in a minute. Even though it's a mandatory item, you want to bring a poncho for a couple of reasons. You can lay it down on the ground and use it as like a buffer between whatever the hell is on the ground, like rat AIDS and just the bubonic plague, and you. So I'll usually lay down a poncho, then my bivy bag, and in that sometimes I'll put my sleep pad, and then I'll throw my sleeping bag in there also to try and minimize how much Victorville, AIDS, and meth, and COVID, and bubonic death, and pregnancy, and meth addiction I will get from sleeping at Victorville. If you're in a fairly clean area, which there's not a lot of, but there's a few, you can also use a poncho as like a half-ass hasty lean-to just to keep some of the wind out. I wouldn't recommend putting a poncho on a window, because that's gonna tell the enemy, like, hey, there's guys sleeping in there. How do you know? They put a fucking poncho over the window so they don't get breezy at night. You can also loan that poncho out to someone on your team who either didn't bring a sleep system, brought a crappy one, or left it at the car after they got it marked off, which sometimes happen. They go through, they get all their stuff checked, and they leave half of it in the car. So you can bring a poncho as like basically an emergency blanket. I mean, it's better than nothing. For clothes, other than what you wear, I'd bring about one change of underwear, maybe two if you really wanted to. I mean, it's not that heavy, you could. About 3 pairs of socks minimum. Sometimes I'll do 5 because sometimes my feet get sweaty depending on what's going on. A change of undershirt, maybe 2 undershirts if you wanted to, and a jacket. Definitely bring a good outer jacket. You don't need to bring rain gear to Victorville events because I don't think it's ever rained at any of those events. Clovis, maybe. In the past, apparently Clovis has been like a big rainy death sentence. This year at Clovis, it did not rain at all. So you didn't need to bring rain gear, which was cool. I personally wear Merrill Moab, I think they're Merrill Moab 2s. I have the non-water resistant and the water resistant. I've never needed the water resistant. I've never needed any rain gear, water resistant, whatever the hell at Victorville. I've never had to use it so far. I don't even think it ever rains there. I don't know. But for Mil Sim West events, it's always pretty dry, but it's windy and cold as hell. The Clovis one, you wouldn't be crazy if you brought an extra pair of footwear. So you wouldn't be out of your mind if you brought like water resistant shoes and non-water resistant shoes. That wouldn't be a crazy thing to do for a Clovis event. BB fight stuff. So without taking into account like whatever very specific impressionist kit you're gonna put together, which chances are if you're watching this video, you're not doing an impressionist kit. You need your airsoft gun, a couple batteries, couple magazines, a small speed loader. Usually I just bring like those SMG style ones. You don't need to bring like a whole ass Odin because you're not gonna get that many BBs. So what's the point in bringing like a big ass Odin if you're probably never gonna have more than 2 to 3 full magazines at a time? And a chest rig. I don't wear plate carriers. I don't feel the need to wear a plate carrier. I'm not doing like a specific kit for anything. I just wear chest rigs. For food, I have a Jet Boil. I think it's the Minimo off the top of my head. I'll usually bring like 3 full meals, like the Mountain House meals. Usually a breakfast meal in addition to that, so 4 total. And then some kind of snacks. Now keep in mind, I'm like 220, so my fat ass needs snacks. If you're one of them little skinny kids and you could go a very long time with a very low amount of food, cool, my fat ass can't do that. Bring at least a gallon of drinking water, and that should get you through the entire event by yourself. They do have like a giant water bladder, which is basically like a big waterbed filled with tap water, like residential tap water out of a hose. I actually think they use Jet the Desert Fox's front yard hose. And it's pretty good. And it's clean, and they put the little water tablets in there to make sure there's no mold or mildew or nothing growing in there. I've never used that water to drink. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just bring like a big gallon thing of water for hydration, and then I will cook with bladder water. For that gallon jug, for sure make sure you're bringing a jug with a very secure top. Not like those easy little pop tops or whatever, something with like some threads or something fairly high speed, because you're gonna have to transport it. So if in the middle of rucking or moving from PB to PB, you drop your water for whatever reason, you're kind of fucked, or you're gonna lose like half your water because the top sucks. I also bring a big, like a 10-inch camping spoon. Just again, I bring Mountain House meals, and like a normal dinner spoon, not really gonna reach that far all the way. So to get like all the good extra bits at the bottom of the bag, my fat ass brings a 10-inch spoon. What are the items you don't need but you want to bring that are usually house cat items? A fucking pillow. My pillow at Mills and West events is a chest rig, unless it's insurgency. You don't need propane heaters. I've seen dudes bring like 3 different airsoft rifles because they only have 3 like low to mid-tier rifles instead of one really reliable one. Now the weather at any California-based Mills and West event is typically beautiful, maybe a little bit rainy. If you've got like a quality airsoft gun, like a Crytek, a KWAT-10, an E&L or an LCT AK, you're going to be fine. You could just, I only bring one gun, that's it for the whole weekend. I've brought either my KWAT-10 and it's lasted me the whole weekend, and consistently I've brought the E&L New Essentials AKM with that sick ass wood, the wood stock on it. I've brought that to 3 events, I believe. Rocked it the whole time with decent amounts of BB gun fights also. So as long as you have one solid, well put together airsoft rifle, you don't need to bring a bunch. Some of the items that are kind of in the middle of like needs and wants, night vision. If it's your first time, I don't recommend you renting night vision. Granted, it's only like, I think like $85, $95 if you want to rent like all the mounts and the arms and all that stuff. I don't recommend it if it's your first time. Chances are you don't know what the hell you're doing, and you can get away with not having night vision. Unless you've taken the time, you've bought your own mounts, you've bought like a Wendy helmet or something like that, and you've done your research and you really want to do this and you know how to be self-sufficient and, you know, quickly troubleshoot any of your night vision issues, like how to turn it on, how to adjust the clarity. Yeah, sure, you can. But it's kind of in the middle of those, like, do I want it versus do I need it spaces. Sunscreen and Chapstick, that's the only thing that I really go house cat on. I try to always bring sunscreen. I usually forget. But I definitely always bring like 1 or 2 things of Chapstick because especially in Victorville, it gets crazy windy and it's crazy dry out there. And then it gets crazy cold at night. And my lips get really chapped. And it gets like that weird irritation. It's a fucking pain in the ass, so I just bring Chapstick. That's like one of the few things I will be a total bitch about. Toilet paper and wet wipes. I have done 3 out of 4 Mills and West events without having to poop. The insurgency I just did, because I had various drinks and food types, my tummy was like, what the hell are you doing? Poop! Nope. So I basically crapped what looked like a Labrador puppy. If at some point during the weekend, you're pretty sure you're gonna need to take the kids to the beach, you might wanna bring your own beach towels. If you are a female, I apologize. It's kind of a struggle for you. They have porta potties on site, and a bunch of dudes use them. If you're a girl, you know what that means, and I am sorry. Content capturing needs, like your GoPros and stuff, is also kind of in that middle space between do you need it versus do you want it? Because if you're bringing a GoPro, you're gonna need, you know, all your accessories, or whatever accessories you need, your mounts and all that. So what I will do for GoPro stuff is I have Wendy, I mount it to my Wendy helmet, and then as a counterweight, I run a big USB pack, and then I will just feed that cord direct into the GoPro. I do not take batteries to Mills and West for GoPros. They will just overheat quickly, and then womp womp, you're kind of screwed. Fun tips: have a Facebook account. Even if like, I don't like Facebook, stop fucking playing airsoft if you don't like social media. What the fuck are you doing? Have a Facebook account, even if it's just for Mills and West events. There is always, listen to me, always a giant event-specific Facebook group where all of the information and all of the details and all of the updates are posted. Usually the only time you're getting an email from Mills and West is your confirmation email when you purchase a ticket, and then like the week of the event, you get your deployment orders and you're told like where the address for the check-in location. That's it if you just rely on email. They do have a Discord server, but if you know how Discord works, like if someone sends a message in 15 minutes, that bitch is gone in like the next 5, unless someone pinged you something like that. With the Facebook group, just like with any Facebook group, you can just arrange it by new posts and just catch up on what's been going on. The easiest way to get through a Milsim West event without just having your dick in your hand the whole time is to have a Facebook account. Don't worry about bringing pyro, especially if it's your first time. Especially if you're going to Victor, really can't use pyro anyway, because that whole thing is just one giant matchbox about ready to explode. Sometimes guys will bring in-game vehicles, commonly called technicals, to Milsim West. The only people who are allowed to keep their rucksacks and their gear on this vehicle at all time is the designated truck crew. So what you're not allowed to do is go, oh cool, a technical, put my rucksack on there, now go walk 2 miles without a rucksack. You're not allowed to do that. Whenever we shift locations or we go from PB to PB, you have to have all your gear with you. That's part of the experience. What you can try to do is, let's say you brought 3 airsoft rifles and you're like, fuck, how am I gonna carry all this shit? Oh my God, if only I had been in the fucking Facebook group and asked this question. If the technical crew is nice enough, maybe you could put 2 of those guns on the truck, assuming they're on the same faction as you. Because if you're militia and they're Rust 4, it's a decent chance you're not gonna see them probably till like Sunday. Read the damn tax op. Especially if it's your first time, I promise you, you need to read this tax op. It's gonna answer all the common questions. And if you ask these questions that are covered in the tax op in the Discord or the Facebook group, they're gonna fucking light you up in the comments, and no one's gonna answer your question. Well, it's probably no one's gonna answer your question for the first couple hours. Everyone's just gonna troll you and tell you to read the tax op. If you do not read the tax op, literally don't complain about anything, because you didn't take the time to read the rules. So you're subject to getting shot in your sleep in the middle of the night. In fact, in the rule set, there's nothing that says that you cannot be full autoed in the face at point blank range while you're asleep. That's fine. That's totally in the rules. That is totally acceptable, because it happens all the damn time. Because you're with a group of new guys and everyone wants to go to bed, so there's no fucking fire watch, there's no security, and Rust 4 just walks through your whole AO and just goes, oh cool, a whole platoon of dudes. Schwack, and you're like, oh, he shot me in my sleep, oh my God, you can't just let a dick move. Hey motherfucker, that's allowed. Getting shot while you're asleep is allowed. Sometimes, if that player is nice, what they'll do is they'll just go up and you go, hey buddy, hey, you're dead, do you have any BBs on you? And you just go, no, bro, thanks for not shwacking me. Have a great night. I'm dead. Bleh. And then you just go back to bed. Sometimes guys will go through and then just fucking like, don't worry about how your rucksack is packed before you leave the house. Because once you get to the venue, you're gonna have to lay out all that shit again anyway. You're gonna have to take all those items out, because your platoon leader is gonna have to do your OCIE layout, which means you pull all your fucking items out and they go down the line. They go, where's your sleeping bag? Okay. Where's your poncho? Okay. Where's your eyebrow? And you have to show it to them. After you get marked off for your OCIE layout, then you could repack it to however the hell you want. Fun stories from events I've been to. More than once, I've seen guys struggles to get their ruck out of their car just to the OCIE layout. So they thought they were gonna be able to last, or really they underestimated just how heavy their ruck was, because they crammed so much unnecessary shit in there. And you see them doing like the old man shuffle with the bad back, looking like the hunchback of Notre Dame with bad knees. Fucking horrible. And those guys usually wash out. The events I was at, there was a really skinny dude with a very big rucksack, and it kind of looked like he had couch cushions on his back, just because his rucksack was that big and he had so much crap in there for like a 2.5 day event, basically. He started to look a little sus, and we were about maybe 100 yards in, and he started to look like the quit monster was gonna get inside his soul. And then he just kept on going, and he kept on. He's like, no, I can do this. I'm not gonna quit. We're like, yes, now we're fucking moto, and we're gonna hang out with this guy. We're gonna cheer him on. It's gonna be great. And he didn't quit, and he made it through. Another guy who was horribly out of shape, that seriously overpacked his rucksack, and I'm like walking a decent way up the hill, and I was like holding part of his rucksack up every now and then. Like, I did that with a few guys. Like, hey man, you okay? Like, oh, I'm gonna get there. So you just grab the back of their ruck and just kind of hold it up a little bit, just to kind of alleviate some of that weight and pressure with your arm, with your basically like your bicep and your arm muscles. Do that for about 30 seconds. Dude, it makes you a new man, basically, or woman. Makes you a new person. It helps to keep that quit monster off your back. Saw a dude trip and fall in like a little mud puddle. I mean, it was only like an inch deep, but we're talking, it's like 11 o'clock, almost midnight. It's pitch dark. None of those guys had nods. I didn't have nods. He'd overpacked a little bit, but he didn't appear to be in the best physical shape, shall we say. And he went face first, like in the mud, covered from face to knees just in mud. His uniform top was all wet and muddy. Now remember, it was only like an inch or so of like top mud and a little bit of a splash water, but that's enough to get your clothes wet and to kind of summon the quit monster to be like, hey, wanna go home, huh? He got back up and BB warriored on. Players arguing at Milsim West events, the standard, nah, I shot you, no, fuck you, I shot you first. Even at Milsim West events, you're gonna get sweaties. Let me offer you this perspective. You're gonna spend about 120 to 150 on a ticket, depending on when you buy it, depending on the venue. You're gonna spend money on camping gear. You're gonna spend money on food. You're gonna spend money on travel, your gas and stuff like that. You're gonna spend time leaving butt-fruckingly early in the morning to drive to the venue. So I'm up in Sacramento. We usually leave like anywhere between 4 and 7 in the morning, depending on what time we want to get there. If you work Friday, you're probably gonna take time off work. Are you gonna let some fucking sweaty shrugging their hits ruin that whole experience? Let me float this by you. Don't play airsoft at Milsim West. Don't. Get that out of your head. You're not going to play airsoft. You're going to have a really cool experience with a group of new friends you're going to make. Let me further float this by you. If you read the tax op, I want you to read the section on blank fire. What you're going to see is not only do you have to go through a way more rigorous safety check-in, not only are you going to have to buy blank ammo, which is not cheap, but calling a blank fire hit isn't mandatory. Let's say I'm a blank fire player, and you are 25 feet in front of me in open ground, like we could see each other direct line of sight. I raise my muzzle, I fire 3 to 5 rounds off. You can, per rule, stand there and laugh at me and flip me off and go, haha, I don't have to call blank fire hits, and then just dump me with your BB gun. That is allowed. Blank fire hits do not have to be called at a Milsim West event. Typically they're going to, because we're all basically cosplaying and LARPing and reenacting. So in the spirit of things and in the spirit of the LARPy experience, guys will call their blank fire hits. But per the tax op, you don't have to. Imagine being a blank fire player, spending all this money and knowing that you're just there to make noise and have an experience. But every time you pull the trigger, that player can just go, and that's allowed per rule. Maybe not the middle finger part, but you understand the concept. Let's get back to the original issue. You put 3 to 5 rounds in some fucking sweaty, normie, peasant muggle airsofter, and they don't call it. Who fucking cares, bro? You rucked in, you got schwacked at night, or you rolled some other faction in their PB at 3 in the morning. You're having a blast. If someone's gonna shrug, fuck them. Let them shrug. They're just a bunch of sweaty airsoft muggles anyway, bro. If you want to have a phenomenal, unique experience, go to Milsim West. If you want to play airsoft, don't buy your ticket. I've seen a decent amount of players pack gear, but they packed crap gear. So, Clovis, it was super cold out, and this one morning, I think it was Sunday morning, like everything had a decent layer of frost over it. My gun, my gear, everything was frosted over. It was actually really beautiful. This one poor dude I think he just packed like a sleeping bag and that was it. And it was like not really rated. It was like a Coleman Walmart bag. And he woke up just filthy wet from the frost and from like, I guess like morning dew. Dude, he woke up miserable, absolutely miserable and wet. Because he didn't bring the right kind of gear. He didn't go, what's the weather gonna be? What's the climate gonna be? Am I bringing the right kind of gear and not just the gear that fits my budget? Washouts. Here is the average sequence of a Milsim West event. Now, maybe venue to venue it might vary, but in my experience, here's basically how it goes down. You have your check-in, your initial ruck to your first patrol base or your first objective, usually your first medium-sized battle en route to that objective, maybe a night battle, maybe a few skirmishy fights here and there depending on what's going on, some varying sized battles from, you know, squad to platoon to 2 platoon size elements on Saturday, leading up to the big ass everyone versus everyone, usually about Saturday evening, about dusk-ish or so, a big ass nighttime shootout sometime between maybe like 1 in the morning to about 3 or 4 in the morning. Then everyone wakes up, kind of go, get your breakfast in, everyone packs up a little bit, and then we go off to the great big ass final fuck you Sunday morning battle. That usually kicks off about 8 to 10 a.m. depending on where it is, and then usually index is around 11 a.m. to noon. Then they do the AAR where they talk about like what they liked, what they didn't like. They gave customer feedback. In a nutshell, that's pretty much how every Milsim West event goes down. Washouts, bell ringers, quitters, food for the quit monster. I'd estimate that about 5% of players will usually wash out or quit or give up or whatever term you want to use. Usually about 5% of that is going to happen on the initial ruck in. So that's usually like the first, I'd say 2 hours after you step off, because they packed too much gear, they underestimated how challenging a hike was, and they just kind of go, fuck this, I'm going home. That honestly happens. You pay all this money, you do all this stuff, and then you don't even make it to the 3rd hour of the game. You don't even reach your first objective. You don't make it past the initial ruck march in. They either pack too much, or they aren't good enough physical condition to compensate for the weight of their rucksack versus and their gear versus the terrain and distance they're going to have to navigate over. It happens. Once you get to your first objective, which is usually your first patrol base, you may have a few more players that are going to quit before the sunrise because they didn't pack the right kind of gear, their sleep system's jacked up, or they don't want it anymore. This kind of in addition to that ruck in. So let's say like your initial ruck in was friggin' rough, and then you get there and you realize you don't have your sleep pad, or you realize just something's just amiss basically. And you're like, all right, you know what? Let me see how this, let me keep going. I'm already here, let me keep going. And at some point they just go, fuck this, I'm out. And a decent amount of, I'd say maybe another 5% will make it to their first objective, but they will not see the sunrise Saturday morning, and they'll bounce. Typically, if you can make it to the Saturday morning sunrise, you've pretty much experienced just about everything there kind of is, in a nutshell. There maybe, you know, there might be a few degrees left or right that you have yet to experience, but for the most part, if you can make it to Saturday morning, bro, you're good to go. The next big quit event is usually Sunday morning. Now, again, usually between about 1 to 3, sometimes 4 in the morning on Sunday morning, like before the sun comes up, there's gonna be another like big ass night raid. Maybe you schwack a patrol base, maybe your patrol base gets schwacked and you totally get rolled over and shot in your sleep. Maybe those things happen. But usually Sunday morning before the sun comes up or just after the sun comes up is usually like the major quit event. And this is typically more than anything, it's guys just going, dude, I had a great time, but I promised my wife that I would be home by about brunch Sunday, so I gotta go. That's usually the big one. Sometimes, depending on what side of the night raid you're on, maybe you're like, dude, fuck this sucks, I don't want to get shot in my sleep, I'm just gonna leave now. That happens too, that's fine. Usually it's the first one. Usually it's guys are like, hey, I had a great weekend and I promised the wife or girlfriend that I would be home before 10 a.m. So see you guys at the next event. In a nutshell, that's really it. That's like all the big stuff.
Caber, who the f*** are you, nerd?